Alberta and Quebec are talking just as both face major political turning points. What are we talking about here? Well, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is in Quebec City meeting with Quebec Premier Christine Fréchette. And this all comes as Alberta is preparing for a referendum in the fall, which includes asking a roundabout question, a 37-word question that's somewhat confusing, but asking if the province wants to move ahead with a proper referendum as to whether to leave Canada. Meantime, here in Quebec, we're heading toward a provincial election, which the governing party, the CAQ, right now looks like they're going to come in third if they're lucky in the standings once the votes are counted. And the PQ has been in the lead, although the Liberals are now starting to close that lead and nip at their butts. However, the PQ, still in the lead, could form the next provincial government, and one of their key platform points is moving on a referendum and separation of Quebec from Canada within its first term. So, it's rather strange that we're having Smith here with Fréchette, although Fréchette's really still a newbie on the political scene as far as in the Premier's chair, because it was, about a month and a half ago, where she won the leadership race.
Right.
However, is this interprovincial alignment or is it strategic positioning? Eddie, what do you think?
Well, you know what, Gary, I'm always for when we have our provinces and territories leaders go visit each other and talk about how to better to increase relationships in economy and trade between the provinces. As you know, we still have trade barriers between our provinces. It's good to see them talk to each other about how to best enhance their provinces economically and standards of life, if you want to call it. But you know, Gary, I'm really happy to see Danielle Smith visiting British Columbia. We've seen that happen often. I know there's a lot of back and forth, especially when we're speaking about the movement of oil and energy out of Alberta across to the Pacific. There's always conversations of British Columbia. And we've had visits over to see Premier Ford in Ontario. This particular visit of Danielle Smith to see Christine Fréchette in Quebec City, it just doesn't smell very good to me, Gary. I know they probably had some discussions about economy and so on and so forth, which is what most people would want to see. How do we strengthen our economy to strengthen Canada? I just don't think that, in my personal opinion and what I've been reading, it seems that much of the conversation is going to be around autonomy, as a country. And I'm sure the discussions of separating from Canadian Confederacy is certainly not just a conversation over a drink after a busy day. I'm sure this is a discussion that they're having in terms of how can we learn from each other, how can we strengthen each other and our individual resolves as provinces right now to A, push a referendum question, B, a campaign around the referendum question to ensure a yes vote, and C, how can we work with each other as independent countries moving forward away from Canada. That is my personal opinion, Gary. It doesn't smell very good. I think just the optics of when this is happening at this particular point in time is extremely important for the formulation of opinions such as mine, and also the media, the pundits, and the individuals who follow this on a daily basis consistently are saying on social platforms and YouTube and whatnot that the timing of this seems a little suspicious. So I don't feel very positive about this mission to Quebec City as being a fruitful outcome for the future of Canada. I don't think that's what the agenda is about.
Well, I do know that a release coming out of Smith's office prior to her jumping the plane and heading east to Quebec City did say that they were going to discuss economic matters as well as, quote, the importance of respect for provincial jurisdiction. And therein, I think, as you were alluding to, lies the rub.
Right.
Both provinces, at least large groups in Alberta for sure, and then here in Quebec, have we have these groups that's all they think about is separation. And Smith has been under a tremendous amount of pressure over the last number of weeks with this whole Alberta separation issue. And that's not going to let up anytime soon. There's even a bit of inter-party battling going on, and a lot of supporters of the UCP in Alberta are not happy with Smith with the way she's handled this referendum question. They wanted a straightforward question on this referendum ballot that's coming up in late October. Right. And that straight up question was, relating to Alberta separating. So you have that side of it, whereas she's asking the question, the way she came about it is she's asking the question, should we move forward? Do you want to move forward with a proper question on Alberta separation from Canada? So she's ignited a fireball within her party, and then anyone outside of the party in the separatist movement. So she has essentially painted herself into a corner in some respects. And she, instead of using the Alberta court ruling that said no one can start talking about separating from Canada until they've sat down and received approval from the First Nations.
Right.
Now that's being appealed, that ruling is being appealed, but that also set up a precedent here in Quebec as well to get First Nations on side, albeit, as we mentioned last week during discussion of Alberta's separation movement, the fact that Alberta has a number of treaties in place, a lot of them predating Alberta as a province. Here in Quebec, we have some numbered treaties in place, but not a lot. We do have a lot of regional, from what I understand, a lot of regional agreements with First Nations in different parts of the province as well. So it's a slightly different aspect to deal with in Quebec. But the fact of the matter is the First Nations are here, and they're called First Nations for a reason. They were here first.
Correct.
And anything that takes place, especially in this now new movement and era of reconciliation, they have to be involved. And it was the First Nations that took it to court in Alberta in the first place because nobody was talking to them on either side, really. So they take it to court, and the court rules in their favor. No, nothing's going to happen until people sit down and talk to you and reach an agreement with you for this. So the whole thing, you're right, Eddie, it's when I heard Smith was coming to Quebec City, and she delivered an address to the Federation of Quebec Chambers of Commerce today, and apparently she did speak in at least some of the speech in French, and also she said sorry about the Canadians. So anyhow, but what's going on behind the scenes? That is the question in my mind.
Well, Harry, do you think part of this mission to Quebec at this particular time, I believe a lot of the discussion was based upon autonomy and then moving forward and becoming nations, in effect. Do you think part of her timing has anything to do to appease the more aggressive in Alberta who want to separate, to appease in their minds that, look, I'm out here speaking to someone else who wants to separate from Canada. You think that was an effort for her to get some brownie points on her side from that particular movement that's been throwing daggers and knives at her over the last little while?
That's a good question. I do know that if you recall back in September, late September, some representatives of the PQ met with some of the leaders of the separatist movement in Alberta to discuss just that separation.
Right.
So you have that aspect of it, and then Frechette says that Quebecers don't want a referendum, but so far she has not indicated whether she would vote for independence. Smith, on the other hand, has come out and said she believes that Alberta has a place in Canada, but also with greater powers over a lot of provincial things.
Well, from that side of it, I don't want to say I can defend their thinking, but you can't argue with their thinking because our province today has got special treatment from the Canadian government, in terms of recognizing it as a distinct society and so on and so forth. Well, why wouldn't other provinces want this as well? So I can understand Danielle Smith's thinking on that particular front. Quebec. If Quebec can get this, well, why is it that Albertans can't get the same thing? For that fact, why doesn't every other province take that position as well? Why does Quebec get these special? I'm not going to call them favors, but just treated with kid gloves, and they can get away with it, right? So I get it.
Well, optics do matter in this as well, with the unity talk versus the sovereignty undertones. And right. Yes, on more than one occasion over the last year and a half that we've been doing this weekly live stream, how many times have you heard me say that Danielle Smith is taking a page out of Quebec's playbook in tackling various issues with the federal government? And
right.
Clearly she has been. Because Quebec has had you can't. Yeah. No, Quebec's had a pretty easy ride in Confederation, actually, when you get right down to it, despite some of the issues that have been raised as part of the whole separation movement here in this province. But fact of the matter is, Quebec has had a pretty good run of it. Now, Smith did mention something the other day as well, that she, on any occasion she met with Legault at the premier's meetings or wherever, that she would bring up from time to time, like, why don't you start developing your resources like natural gas? Because apparently we do have quite a large reserve natural gas, yeah. So, and if Legault's response has been, as it was with the pipeline, the Energy East pipeline going through, is there's no social conscience for that. And I still, I know I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. I can't get my head around social conscience or conscience for a project.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make economic sense to me. It doesn't make sense at all, really. What is this? To me, it's like you're grabbing at something in the air, and it seems to stick right now from a political standpoint, so that's what we'll use. But here's the thing, as Smith says, and this is a contentious point with Alberta, and I totally understand. The fact is, Quebec getting the largest amount of equalization payments of any province in the nation. And we're sitting on resources. I mean, we have the hydroelectric, which they're doing a pretty good job of selling power. So there's no issue there. But when you have things like natural gas, large reserves of natural gas, and you're not even touching them, and we could be running that natural gas right down to the Maritimes, and then on tankers and over to Europe.
Yeah.
And Quebec would be bringing in all kinds of money on that and royalties and everything, and that's one of the bones that Alberta has to pick with Quebec, and the fact that here we are, we're getting a huge amount of equalization payments, and yet we're one of the richest provinces, at least on paper at the moment, with the reserves underground.
Yeah. I mean, from the social conscious perspective, I mean, that can include, I mean, that's a wide statement without, being specific. So, you're looking at the environmentalist, you're looking at the social conscience of the people and so on and so forth. I mean, these projects always go through environmental studies, and project plans always work around the limitations imposed to make sure that the environment isn't damaged and the safekeeping of the environment as best possible during project and post-project. That always happens. Is there some inconvenience at the beginning? Absolutely, Gary. I mean, if you're sitting on a gold mine like LNG and you choose to do nothing about it, what's the motivation behind that? Because we are getting money from Ottawa, and you know what? Why spend all this money if we can get the money from Ottawa and not have to spend this? Appease the social and environmentalists on this? I don't know. And the funny thing is, very often you'll hear some of the environmental leads in the country. I'm not just saying Quebec, but in the country, always, and I think it's very important to have our environmentalists to keep checks and balances in place on the government and provincial projects and whatnot and protect our environment. I'm all for that. But by the same token, you'll hear them complaining about the economy of their province or the economy of the country in parallel to being an environmentalist that's preventing a province from actually getting the necessary economy to improve the situation of its citizens in its province. So it's almost ironic and hypocritical. I mean, that's the way I see it. So absolutely. I mean, I know a lot of individuals that are very, very environmentally focused and environmentally conscious, but by the same token, you have to look at the reality of the world. Energy is extremely important. It is what it is. It's, a lot of our economies and our energy are, fossil fuels based. And like we talked about it last week, until we find a solution to replace the dependency on fossil fuels for everything, from fuel to product, to byproduct of fossil fuels, it is what it is. You just can't eliminate opportunities for a province to evolve and make people's lives better just because of social conscience and what environmentalists want to say. That impacts a lot of people. Gary, you and I know right across the country, yes, we have Health Canada, we have health services, and both you and I have benefited from that. But it's crumbling. Literally, it's crumbling, Gary. So unless we get an influx of additional monies coming into Canada and coming into the provinces, how are we supposed to mitigate some of these bigger problems in the country right now than, thinking about social and environmental concerns when we have gold mines right in our backyard we can actually exploit for the benefit of environmentalists and the social and the social thinking and the rest of the population. So I, like you, Gary, I just don't get it. I'm not trying to trivialize those very, very important organizations and thoughts, but at some point you have to say enough is enough. We got to start moving forward, not just staying where we are, status quo, and not progressing. So, the other token too. I mean, if there is a solid movement here in Quebec to separate, well, wouldn't you want to leverage every resource you have in your province to make sure that the separation from Canada is economically feasible? as opposed to just having all this stuff sitting in the background and not doing anything with it. I don't know. I mean, you can go in all kinds of directions with this, but I like you, Gary. I just don't get it. I mean, the East Pipeline when it got quashed, and Daniel Smith rightly said, "Hey, you got this repository in your province, and why aren't you doing anything with it?" So I would have loved to have seen a little bit more digging by the media to clearly understand what the leader of the CAC at that time thought, or what he was saying about the social conscience and respecting it.
Yeah, we should get one of our good friends like ChatGPT to weigh in on that and see what they can find for us. So that would be interesting. I just remember the phrase social conscience, and I just like I have never been able, as I said, to fully understand how that works into it. I can see how it works into it to a degree. Okay, we've got to make sure that there's a balance here between industry and the communities involved. I get that. That's pure negotiation and very, very tight and strict contracts. So to me that handles that whole issue. Beyond that, and if you don't sit down and try to negotiate, then what do you have?
Yeah, exactly.
Just a phrase. Would you be kind and keep her?
That's a very interesting comment. I'm not sure Quebec would want her. She probably doesn't qualify for obvious reasons, but I won't say anything more.
Yeah, we have enough issues to deal with on our own without importing any, for sure. But yeah, thanks for the putting a smile on our faces. That was worth it. So
that's a good one.
Yeah, for sure. But Eddie, even if they're not really talking about formulating some kind of a game plan related to separation of both provinces or one or the other, they're still coming out of it. Like if Quebec is in polls show that Quebecers don't even want to discuss a referendum. They don't even want to discuss it. So, but still, Quebec has had a special place in Confederation and does carry a lot of clout. So even if, to me, Smith coming here to meet with Frechette and having these discussions, she's going to go back to Alberta, and I think you're going to see some kind of strategic alliance coming out of this between Quebec and Alberta, and that the two of them will carry bigger sticks when they're going to Ottawa or talking to Ottawa or sitting down, with the Prime Minister about whatever. Because of these discussions, because of the fact that in Alberta right now it's raging as far as the separation is concerned. Although, again, the majority of Albertans, when you check the polls, say no, they don't want to separate from Canada. But you have a very, very, very vocal minority at the moment, it seems. And as here in Quebec right now, the same thing. It's not even a vocal minority at the moment. We have the PQ talking about it. It's in the platform, and they do have supporters who want to see us separate from Canada. Anyhow, any way you look at it, this to me, was a very strategic move on Smith's part, and Frechette to, say, yes, come and we'll sit down and talk, and for them to compare notes on this whole issue. And as I say, I think both Alberta and Quebec will come out of these meetings stronger in the way that they approach Ottawa and the Prime Minister. And the folks in the nation's capital are going to have to listen. When these two come calling, they're going to have to listen to them. There's no other way around it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, provincial ministers meeting, I think, is a great thing for interprovincial relationships and building Canada. To me, Gary, it just does not. The timing of it is just not right. Alberta, she's coming over here. She's getting her butt kicked by the separatist movement on a variety of issues. And why not go visit somebody that's equally interested in separating and maybe get some brownie points? And I'm sure the conversations went around planning forward on how both provinces may be able to separate and continue relationships thereafter. I think a lot of conversation was based on that. And you have to realize too, the majority of leaders of CAC were former PQ card carrying members. So there's always that element within CAC about a separatist movement, behind the scenes separatist movement within. The PQ is very obviously upfront about it. But we'll see what happens with this, Gary. I mean, look, Alberta's referendum happens October 18 or 19 or something like that.
yes.
And Quebec's election's the 5th of October this year. So,
that's right.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on here, and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
So we are going to vote her out. The Seppies don't beat us to it. But you don't have an election in Alberta for another year or year and a half, I believe, isn't it? Or is it next year?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, just off the top of my head. I'd have to go look that up. But that's an interesting idea. However, if the Seppies don't beat us to it, yeah, I don't think you have enough of an axe to swing as far as the separatists in Alberta. They're very vocal, but it's a much smaller group than the average Albertan who doesn't want. They would just wish that this would just go away.
Yeah.
I think that's what you're going to find. October 27th is their
October 27th.
provincial election this year? Oh, October of next year. Okay.
27th. Late last week or earlier this week, I mean, we were looking at, I forget what media outlet I've seen this in, but a breakdown of the 700,000 signatures that were presented in Alberta to push for a referendum. What they don't openly communicate, especially the separatist movement, what they don't openly communicate that 400,000 of those signatures wanted a referendum for people that did not want to separate. They clearly said they don't want to separate from Canada, and the 300,000 wanted to. So that wasn't openly communicated, which I found extremely surprising. But I understand why the separatist movement wouldn't want that kind of number to go out. As far as they're going to communicate, it's 700,000 signatures, and the way they're communicating is that 700,000 signatures that want the referendum on to separate, which is in fact not the case, which supports what you're saying, is that the majority of Albertans don't want to leave Canada.
Now, a good point here too is Sylvester is threatening her at an AGM, which I would imagine would be coming up either later this year or early next year before the election. So, and that's he's one of the leaders of the separation movement.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a very definite rift within the UCP right now between separation or separatists and those who want to stay in. Let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Sylvester is telling separatists to join the UCP so they can vote her out. And he says he will call the meeting in August. This is going to be must-see TV over the next few months in Alberta,
Oh, yeah.
the way that this is going to unfold. really must-see TV.
Gary, I see a story in this pretty much every week. And as we get closer to referendum date, I think it's going to get very dirty, as a matter of fact. It's going to be a lot of mudslinging back and forth. And
Yeah,
you know what the sad part about this is? The consequences from this is the people of Alberta, both pro-Canadian and pro-separatist, are going to suffer the consequences. You and I both know, we've seen it here in Quebec twice and continuously. When there is uncertainty in a government, uh, international investment starts to dwindle. And I think just because of this back and forth, this push for separatism in Alberta, and the fight of Albertans to keep Alberta in Canada, investors are watching. We talked about it last week. Carney's been all over the planet promoting Canada, and getting MOUs in place, and business leaders from from Canada visiting organizations in Europe and Asia, looking at investment. You know what? If I was an investor in another country looking at Alberta and saying, you know what? I think I'm going to hold off a little bit until your province settles down. So the sad part for me is I've seen it here in Quebec, and I hate to see it happen to the beautiful people of Alberta. All of this back and forthing until a referendum happens, and then after the fact, whatever happens after the referendum, lose or win, it's inevitable. I mean, you see it happen all over the place. Very sad to see that.
yeah, yeah, very, very, very much so. And there was a comment at some point over the weekend, I think, from somebody in relation to the segment one last week on Alberta separation. And they said, you two are talking kind of doom and gloom. And yes, we were close to separating, but look at what's happened in the province since then, and listed a number of things. And I'm reading through it, and it looked impressive, including, I don't understand. We got new hospitals, that's for sure, super hospitals, beautiful hospitals. We just don't have a healthcare system to run them properly, but then that's a whole other story. But pretty much everything that this individual mentioned was more government investment, provincial and or federal. There wasn't, when I went down through the list, and I may be wrong in my assumptions as I go through the list, but it seemed to me that they weren't the sort of projects where you would get private investment. And that's what we're saying. The private investment is not, it's still not where it could have been even in the last 5 or 6 years, because we're still kind of, okay, hands off. And then we have the PQ opening up a wide lead in the polls at the time. And what's the first thing they're talking about is a referendum in the first term. So it's still going to be like an investor is just going to say, well, we'll just keep an eye on this, but we're not putting any money in there for the time being. Yeah. And then you get into a lot of other things. Like I tried to do something the other day related to the provincial government, and it was a business item, actually. And I just want to say one thing. I, as just a small business type individual, spent 4 hours working through this thing where I ended up putting in the same information again and being asked the same questions over and over, and I still never finished it because I just gave up. I just said, I surrender, I've had enough. And all I was trying to do was register a company. Register a company. I wasn't trying to incorporate, just register a company. It was bizarre. Anyway, that's a whole other story, a whole other segment, and I'll stay away from it for now. So our takeaway from all of this, Eddie, I think is this. it isn't just a meeting, it's a signal. And I think that comes right back around to what we were saying about 15 minutes ago, that it is sending a signal, and that these two provinces, these two women, will have the full attention of Carney and the Liberal government whenever they stop by Ottawa, or they pick the phone up and call Ottawa, or Carney comes through. And I would venture to say you'll see a little bit more of Carney spending more time specifically in Alberta right now, but also here in Quebec as well.